Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The tricky part of it, of course, is not knowing how long this will go on for.
Water levels sink, prompting a state of emergency for one part of BC, the fallout, and why some businesses are being forced to close. Also, from new mayors to reversing expensive plans, a look at municipal elections and how they've changed the landscape of the province.
We have a lot of staff, over 30 years of service. I see that over the next little while being a greater challenge maybe than historically it has been.
Plus, the struggle to recruit workers while losing others to retirement, the desperation, and how some companies are making it work.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. We begin tonight with drought conditions so bad it's forced BC's Sunshine Coast to declare a local state of emergency. The order calls for shutting off the water supply from the local reservoir, and that means shutdowns for some businesses too. Dan Burrett is live with us now to break it all down. Dan, so what do we know?
We may live in a temperate rainforest, we know, Anita, but we've had anything but rain these past hot months. That's why today, as you said, the Sunshine Coast Regional District declared that local state of emergency, the first time it's ever done so because of a drought. It says it does have enough water through early November, but that's just 2 weeks away. So the order is meant to save more water in case there is no significant rain over the next few weeks. It says it must prioritize people, the hospital, and firefighting.
Because we're not sure how it all transpires, there is a need to reduce the community demand ahead of time. So that's why we're currently putting the state of emergency in place.
The District of Seashield and the Seashield First Nation have also declared local states of emergency, Anita.
Okay, Dan, so what about the businesses and services that are being hit by this order?
Very tough news for some. Heavy industry, brewers, growers, and people even just wanting to go for a swim. They must stop using treated drinking water by midnight tomorrow. For example, the Seashield Aquatic Centre will close tomorrow night until that order is lifted. Also ordered to shut down are breweries, cideries, non-medical cannabis growers, and concrete and cement installation, repair and cleaning companies, among others. One brewer in Gibson says the water is already off at their farm. Now the brewing itself will stop. He hopes they can still sell the beer and cider they have made.
We're aware that the SCRD hasn't installed the infrastructure necessary to address prolonged droughts like this. And so this doesn't come as a complete shock, but it is, as you can imagine, deeply disappointing.
Smith says they are already fundraising to install solar panels and drill a well. The district says it's still waiting to hear from the province and Ottawa about changing the water release pattern from the area's main reservoir. That's at Chapman Lake. Anita.
It's hard to believe it's come down to this, Dan. Thank you. And from droughts to wildfires, the sky across parts of the province has been eerie, bleak, and downright dangerous. An air quality advisory for Metro Vancouver is still in place. As Chad Pawson reports, it's the fourth day of warnings, and they're expected to persist until the weather changes.
Hazy skies across Metro Vancouver with smoke from wildfires settling over the North Shore Mountains. Air quality in the region has been poor for days, but it's not stopping these hikers.
No, I cannot tell.
I didn't think about it.
A little bit chopped, a little bit smoky, a little bit, but not that bad.
Is it the best thing I did? Probably not, but I enjoy what I'm doing.
Metro Vancouver is warning residents and urging them to reduce outside physical activity, and that poor air this late into the fall season is unusual.
These aren't the highest concentrations of smoke we've been measuring, but certainly it's the latest in the year that we've experienced wildfire smoke impacts, rather. So with a change in climate, we can expect longer and drier summers with more prolonged wildfire seasons.
In 2018, the Lower Mainland was stuck under health advisories for 22 days in a row from wildfires. But the problem now, extended hot weather is prolonging wildfire seasons and increasing a threat to public health.
That wildfire smoke period is lengthening. Could extend from April to now into October. This is really unprecedented.
People with underlying health concerns are most at risk during periods of bad air. Experts like Brower say ultimately that risk increases to more people over time, and that even those considered healthy will be affected.
I've been suffering with really bad like mucus buildup and throat problems and drying and hard to breathe.
But I think it's going to rain in a couple of days. Every year it's like that.
Population health experts say this is what the future looks like.
I think we have to look at this as just a challenge. This is a change. We know that we can adapt both sort of behaviorally, administratively, and technically. It's a matter of getting on with it because this is not going to get better.
And that behavioral changes from both individuals and governments will be needed as we strive to adapt. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, obviously very scary with the drought and the wildfires. So I know that you've been talking about some relief that could be in sight.
Anita, I am so pleased that it is still in the forecast. We saw it late last week, and it is still showing up for this Friday. We may even see some changes as early as Thursday, but until then, more of what we've had today. Here's a look at those special weather statements in place for air quality. It has just lifted for the west coast. Tofino getting some drizzle this morning, a bit more marine air, but generally that southerly flow coming up from the south will continue to sock in that air quality, and the fine particulate matter is at dangerous levels for those at risk. I actually found this great map from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency just to remind you of those particulate matters. We don't often have to do a reminder in October, but that's a human hair. You can see those blue balls. Those are microns, and within those microns, those are the particulate matter when we talk about ppm. So that's how small these wildfire particulate matters are, and that's why it gets into homes and cars, and probably many of you felt it in your eyes and throat over the weekend. Still the story over the next couple of days. Also, had to show you the record-breaking temperatures. We did not quite hit 30 in places like Abbotsford because of the smoke. That dropped temperatures about 3 to 4 degrees. So can you imagine without the smoke, we would have hit those 30-degree temperatures. Nonetheless, these are all 12, 15 degrees above our seasonal. The culprit has been this extraordinarily high pressure system, and it is finally going to see a breakdown as we head into the end of the week. So this next Pacific system will move down into Thursday. Some models bringing a few showers Thursday night to Metro Vancouver. Others, that high pressure system holding strong. It's Friday. Check this out. That is a sight for sore eyes. All of that green on the map on Friday is rain, and unbelievably actually getting some snow for the first time in our mountains. Normally we would have that first fall. So that is the snapshot on Friday we want. Is it going to be too much? I'll have to break down any flooding concerns a bit later on in the show, Anita.
Man, can't catch a break. Droughts and all the things, and then now into flooding.
All the things.
Okay, thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
A man and woman have been found dead inside a vehicle near Alpha Secondary School in Burnaby this afternoon. It happened in the area of Alpha Avenue and Venables Street around 1:45, just near Brentwood Mall. Burnaby RCMP responded to a report of 2 deceased people. IHIT has since taken over the case, and homicide investigators are asking anyone with information to contact them. IHIT is also investigating an incident that happened earlier today after a man was found dead at the UBC Golf Club. Police were called just before 10 a.m. after reports of shots being fired. At least 6 RCMP cruisers arrived to the parking lot of the public golf course in the city's west side. They found a man suffering from gunshot wounds, and despite life-saving efforts, the 38-year-old died at the scene.
This time we're looking to speak to anyone who was in the area who may be able to provide us a description of any vehicles that were associated or any suspects. Again, anyone who would have dash cam video that was driving in the area, if you could please contact IHIT, we'd really appreciate it.
A burning vehicle was located in an alley nearby shortly after the shooting, but police aren't saying if the 2 incidents are related. Well, Vancouver's Mayor-elect Ken Sim made his first public appearance today since his election victory on Saturday. Ken Sim says he'll push through on campaign promises to hire 100 police officers, and it could happen within a year. As John Hernandez reports, members of Vancouver's Chinatown community say the messages of public safety resonated with voters.
We're super excited that the City of Vancouver gave us a very clear message that they want change.
Just days after a dominant showing at the polls, Vancouver's future mayor says he's ready to take the reins.
We're going to do what we can control that will affect change.
Ken Sim and his slate ABC Vancouver will make up the majority of the next city council, winning 8 seats. Chief among the party's platform is to improve public safety.
We want to make sure that we hire 100 police officers and 100 mental health nurses, and they work together.
A campaign promise made amid growing worries over street crime, particularly in neighborhoods like Chinatown, where concerns over graffiti, hate crimes, and random assaults have mounted since the last municipal election.
We've seen a general erosion of the neighborhood.
And local businesses have struggled.
Running a business in Chinatown is hard. With all the added pressures and all the added problems, it becomes even harder.
Community leaders here have long been asking for more officers on the ground. Calls merchants say were answered in Sim's campaign.
When Ken Sim started running along with his ABC team, they came to Chinatown a lot, and they spoke with many Chinatown stakeholders often. And they really took their time to find out what we needed the most.
I think the Chinese community really came out and supported Ken, not because he's Chinese or because of his ethnic background, because of the need for law and order in the city.
A bond with the community the mayor-elect has pledged to strengthen through his term.
We were very clear that we're going to put a City of Vancouver office in Chinatown. That way you'll have, representation from, City Hall there.
In the end, it will be up to the VPD to decide where to deploy its additional officers who could be on the street within a year. Sim will take office on November 7th. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, a few municipalities in BC have also chosen a person of color as mayor for the first time. Simon Yu will be the new mayor of Prince George. He is the first person of color to hold that position. Yu got roughly 40% of the vote. Williams Lake has elected Surinderbal Rathore as the city's first mayor of color. Rathore served on council for 21 years before losing back-to-back bids for mayor in 2014 and 2018. And we are just learning outgoing Surrey Mayor Doug McCallum has decided not to concede. A statement from his party, the Safe Surrey Coalition, says legal advisors are looking towards a judicial recount. Now, McCallum lost to Brenda Locke by 973 votes. We'll be following that story with updates as they come in. And of course, despite McCallum's decision not to concede, Locke, who is mayor-elect, is moving ahead with her promises and moving fast to stop the transition of the city's police force. Her campaign was the only one to commit to keeping the RCMP in Surrey. But as Mayor Baines reports, BC's public safety minister says the issue is complex.
From an election night victory in a tight race, Surrey Mayor-elect Brenda Locke is pushing ahead with her promise of stopping the transition to a city police force and doing interview after interview.
I've met with the RCMP as well as city staff, so we absolutely know that we can move this forward.
Surrey Mayor-elect Brenda Locke says her mandate is clear.
This is not a reversal. The police of jurisdiction in the city of Surrey is the RCMP. They will remain that. We're not reversing anything. We're carrying on.
People have been waiting to hear from Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth on the future of the Surrey Police and what happens next.
Right now, there's a lot of rumor and a lot of speculation, and that's what that is.
The province would ultimately have to give its approval to stop the police transition and reverse course to the RCMP. Farnworth says it's not like flicking a switch.
In order for a transition to take place, whether going forward or whether going backward, there needs to be a proper plan put together that addresses the issues around adequate and effective policing.
Farnworth says Surrey will need to come up with a detailed plan on how it will deal with human resources and finance issues if it plans to untransition.
She hasn't met with Surrey Police.
McDonald questions what will happen to 350 staff, including 150 police officers.
Now, on a whim, without a plan, they're being told that this is all going to be stood down.
So far, he says the city has spent $100 million on the transition. The head of the Surrey RCMP says it looks forward to working with the new mayor and council and says its focus is on public safety. However, others are digging in for a fight. The grassroots group Wake Up Surrey advocated for a city police force and organized a show of support and public anger before McCallum was elected.
So if the SPS goes back and there's already shortage of RCMP officers all over Canada, so what will happen to the fight we are fighting against gang violence and drugs?
Not only does Surrey's mayor want to meet with Public Safety Minister Mike Farnworth, so does Wake Up Surrey. The group also plans on meeting with community leaders. Mira Baines, CBC News, Victoria.
And in the Fraser Valley, Chilliwack has made history in this municipal election. An openly transgender man has been elected to the school board. As Saurabh Sandhu explains, it's another sign that the city and region continues to move in new directions.
Chilliwack has elected a transgender man, Terry Westerby, as a school trustee, and members of the LGBTQ+ community are elated.
I was mixed between being proud of what we have accomplished here in Chilliwack and being proud of what Chilliwack has accomplished for itself.
An accomplishment that many in the community have been hoping for a long time.
While I love this community, it has come a long way, and Terry's election victory last night is a sign of just how far Chilliwack has changed from when I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s to today.
For Westerby, however, the road to victory has been extremely challenging.
Being an openly LGBTQ and openly transgender person takes a little bit of bravery. I only want to say a little because I'm talking about myself here, but it really does take a lot of bravery because you then become a target to people who don't agree with who you are as a person.
Westerby has had a tough campaign. His campaign signs were vandalized with vulgar graffiti just a few days before the election day. Here in Chilliwack, there were 15 candidates in contention for school trustee positions. Parents Voice BC, an electoral organization that has an open stand against SOGI, had 3 candidates in the running. Just one was successful. Barry Neufeld, the incumbent trustee from School District 33, is known for making controversial comments about LGBTQ+ community. However, this time he found little support at the ballot box and ended 12th on the list of candidates. When it comes to SOGI curriculum, UBC professor Jason Ellis says it's not really up to school boards to decide on broader education policy.
When it comes to SOGI, they must implement policies, legislation and regulations that are provincial. They must act in accordance with the wishes of the minister.
Terry Westerby has high hopes for the next 4 years, including bringing more representation and addressing the needs of children from LGBTQ+ community. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Chilliwack.
Well, it has been 48 hours since those elections happened. And when you look at the bigger picture, some trends are starting to emerge. No one, of course, loves analyzing those trends more than our own municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy. Justin, I hope you have recovered since the weekend.
Oh, a little bit. 5 hours of sleep is good, right?
Okay, we'll talk about that after. First, let's get into the big dip in voter turnout that we saw. What's happening with that?
Yeah, but it's not like turnout for municipal elections has ever been really high. But when you look at this year, taking across the entire province compared to 4 years ago, it's not a happy story. Take a look at this chart. It shows over the last 5 elections what the BC-wide trend is for eligible voters. And you can see, after a few years of it going up, it dropped by quite a bit this year, just 28%. Now, that's not an all-time low, but it's not exactly a happy story. And you look some places, Vancouver slightly higher than that, some places even lower, Langley less than 20% of eligible voters. So a big question will be for a lot of these communities, what happened? Why was turnout so much lower than 4 years ago? And what could they do in the future to make things easier for voters?
Yeah, I know in Burnaby, the mayor's running uncontested. So I think people sort of put up their hands and said, why should I go vote? That is one story, but a lot of mayors are mayors no more. Tell us about all that turnover.
Yeah, and in Vancouver, Surrey, Kelowna, a lot of big cities, we saw this happen. And so we looked into, okay, of the percentage of mayors running again, how many were reelected and what does that look like? And if you take a look at this chart, this is what it shows. And you can see it's actually a little bit higher this time compared to 4 years ago, 65% or so compared to 61%. But it used to be much more than that. So certainly a declining lack of trust in politicians is something we sometimes hear about. It seems to be evident, at least when it comes to mayors. They have less of a chance of winning if they run again. But it's the fact that these are the biggest cities where this happened in Vancouver, Surrey, in Saanich as well. Prince George has a new mayor. Kamloops has a new mayor, even though they didn't defeat incumbents in those places. So a lot of change in City Hall. It'll be interesting over the next couple weeks as people start making their first committee appointments, start figuring out how they want to change the budget for next year, what signals these new mayors send to their communities.
Committees and budgets, all things that we look to you for, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
Another province-wide bump in ferry prices is coming. BC Ferry says the rising cost of fuel means it's forced to increase the fuel surcharge by 1.5%. The cost for an adult on the Metro Vancouver to Vancouver Island routes will go up by 70 cents and by $3.15 for a vehicle and driver. On the smaller routes, the increase will go up an average of 40 cents for an adult and $1.70 for a vehicle and driver. The company had already increased fuel surcharges to 2.5% back in June. The new changes go into effect November 1st. And with the cost of food soaring, Canada's largest grocer is freezing prices on its no-name products for 3 months. It remains to be seen whether this step will be enough to appease frustrated consumers, and as Anita Bathe reports, whether other grocers will follow suit.
At the grocery store, shoppers are looking for relief.
I used to spend like $40 a week, and then it ended up becoming like $70 a week.
Grocery, it costs a lot for us. And frankly speaking, it jeopardizes our monthly budget.
I'm having a hard time living and keeping up with inflation. And yeah, it's a nightmare.
Now Loblaws says while it can't control the prices set by suppliers,
food prices go up, no-name prices won't. Guaranteed.
It can set prices for its no-name food products and will freeze them until the end of January. Food bills are up almost 11% in a year, and with major grocery chains seeing profits increase, they've become a target for consumer frustration. But some experts say there's no evidence of price gouging.
The price increases that we see at the grocery store are reflecting higher costs of producing those goods and services.
This economist took a look at the numbers, and while corporate profits overall are at record highs, profit margins have held steady.
Rising profits is not a contributor to inflation. The higher profits that we're seeing are largely driven by high commodity prices and high energy, oil and gas prices in particular.
But others say companies are still coming out on top.
Corporations are doing much more than just passing on higher costs. They are taking advantage of this particular moment with all the disruptions after the pandemic to fatten their own profit margins.
So while questions over profits and prices continue, Loblaws' price freeze may cool some of the heated debate, while grocers in other countries have made similar moves. No word yet on whether Loblaws' Canadian competitors will follow suit. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
And we spoke to grocery shoppers here in Vancouver about the move today.
Every little bit counts, so it's an expensive city and the timing's perfect. It's good optics.
Well, I'm sure it'll help a lot of people, right?
Trying to get fresh groceries or fresh fruit now is ridiculous, so something to offset that will be greatly appreciated.
If they freeze all the price, sometimes it helps, sometimes no.
That's a good thing. It helps out a lot of families.
Prices of more than 1,500 grocery items will be locked in at Loblaws, No Frills, and Real Canadian Superstores until January 31st. Well, for women, taking the COVID shot can impact their menstrual cycle. So what considerations should you bear in mind if you're planning to get vaccinated again? We talk to our resident doctor next. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. A Pinwheel exhibit in New Brunswick hopes to combine art and climate advocacy. The installations were made by local artists at community workshops in the hope that they will get their community to start talking about renewable energy.
I'm a part of the group that's called From Heart to Harmony, and as artists, we did this exhibition for the third shift, which was a project based in St. John, and that came about just to helping to put the word out about renewable energy. All the artists created this amazing pinwheels that you can see here today, as well as the community during the 3-day event had a chance to make their own. So our goal is really to express our concerns about our footprint in here in the community, and hopefully to push the province towards to a more renewable source of energy like the wind. I really see an art as, as a catapult, as a place that, with your work you can really amplify the message to the crowds. People are being very excited just to see the work because it is so unique, and we'll be posting a lot of on social media and being people are just excited about this, having this reunion between art and sustainability. We try to be as sustainable as possible with the materials, so they use a lot of recycled materials. Some of them are local materials, as there is a pinwheel here on my back that uses a birch bark and natural materials to make those. Art is just the perfect marriage to activism and sustainability, and to bring those messages out faster and in a strong way.
Well, as people are getting their next round of COVID vaccines, more evidence is emerging on the impacts to women's health. Women have been reporting that coronavirus vaccines seem to be affecting their menstrual cycles. And while COVID-19 vaccinations during pregnancy reduce risks, questions remain. Researchers are taking a closer look at the differences between men and women when it comes to long COVID and exposure risks. For more insight on this, I'm joined by Dr. Melissa Lem, a clinical assistant professor at the University of British Columbia and family doctor here in Vancouver. Dr. Lem, what do we know about how COVID-19 and the vaccine affects the menstrual cycle?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that this is one of the most common questions that women come in to see me for is period problems, right? And the thing is, there are so many different things that can cause irregularity in your menstrual cycle, from stress, which a lot of us have right now, to changes in diet, to travel, to exercising too much, to infections. So the thing is, if you've had your COVID-19 vaccine and you notice an irregularity in your menstrual cycle, it could just be one of these factors. That said, there was a recent study published in the British Medical Journal of about 20,000 1,000 women that showed that women who have 2 COVID-19 vaccines during one menstrual cycle, so that's from day 1 of one period to day 1 of the next, actually can delay their period by about 4 days. And if you have 1 vaccine during that time, it delays your period by under a day with no change in the actual heaviness of the cycle. So not major changes, but these are things that women notice because they think when they're having a medical procedure done, they're hypervigilant about what might happen next.
So maybe that pregnancy scare isn't so much of a pregnancy scare, but actually just the COVID vaccine.
That's right.
Speaking of pregnancy, you know, during the height of COVID, the recommendation was for pregnant women to get the vaccine. Has that changed? What are we seeing?
That has not changed at all. So to be very direct, getting vaccinated against COVID-19 during pregnancy is one of the best things that you can do for your health and the health of your baby. So there's lots of evidence showing that it's very safe. So there's no increase, for example, in miscarriage or preterm birth. And in fact, it's safe at every stage. So from pre-pregnancy planning to actually being pregnant to breastfeeding. And in fact, we know that pregnant women who get COVID-19 are at higher risk of complications. They tend to go to the intensive care more. They tend to be hospitalized more. They also tend to, unfortunately, have more preterm births, and their babies tend to go to the neonatal intensive care sooner. So this is why early on in the pandemic, the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada actually recommended that pregnant people be prioritized for vaccination.
Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit because everyone seems to be talking about the wildfire smoke. It's not going away. We're in the middle of October, so it's unfortunate that it's here. I mean, anytime it is. But, you know, I'm really hearing from a lot of people who are saying they have all these random symptoms and they don't know what it's from. So can you talk about the symptoms of wildfire smoke and what we can do to mitigate them?
So inflammation is what happens when we breathe in that PM 2.5 or fine particulate from wildfire smoke. And it can cause all kinds of different symptoms, like you mentioned, headaches, like respiratory irritation, so red eyes, runny nose, sore throat. It can also affect your mood. And in fact, it can increase diabetes complications, increase asthma exacerbations, and even heart attacks in the short term. So this is one of the worst things that we can do for our health is breathe in air pollution from wildfire smoke. And unfortunately, it's another extreme weather event that's driven by climate change. This drought that we're seeing, no rainfall, dries out forest, means they burn more easily. And we see these effects with wildfire smoke. So we really have to keep that in mind in the future to make sure that we wear our masks when we're outside because they filter out air pollution as well, and then have air purifiers indoors as well.
It really makes you think about people who live in a place like Delhi or in Beijing and what they have to deal with every day. Dr. Melissa Lem, thank you.
Thank you.
The Ukrainian capital under attack today, drones raining down on the city, leaving many dead. The effort to fight back is next.
There's a major development in the bombing of a Toronto manufacturing plant almost a week ago. A group called Direct Action has claimed responsibility for the explosion at Lytton Industries. It says it's sorry for the injuries, but not sorry for the bombing because it was an attack on the nuclear arms industry. Terry Malewski reports.
The copying machine ran overtime today at the Toronto office of The Clarion, a left-wing monthly which this morning received a letter headed Direct Action claiming responsibility for the Lytton bombing. A Clarion spokesman said the paper was not for or against the bombing.
We have taken absolutely no position on the bombing itself at all, and at this point I don't think we're prepared to.
The letter is a 3-page apology for mistakes made by the bombers and 6 pages condemning nuclear arms. There is every reason imaginable to tear down the systems and makers of nuclear war, it says. We sincerely regret that any injuries occurred. Accidents happen. The bomb exploded 12 minutes before it was supposed to. It is a mystery. We checked and double-checked the timing system. Still, it says injury could have been avoided if the guards had promptly evacuated the Lytton plant. We have written the above not to redeem ourselves as we did commit inexcusable errors, but simply as an explanation of our motives and intentions for those people who may feel threatened that there are crazed terrorists on the loose against the Canadian people. We never intended any harm to come to anyone. The letter also names 3 other companies as being involved in nuclear weapons: Hawker Siddeley of Toronto, Vickers of Montreal, and Heeds International of Port Moody, BC. And it was in BC that Direct Action apparently has acted before. This was the letter claiming responsibility for the bombing of a BC hydro installation on Vancouver Island May 31st. And the dynamite used at Lytton may have come from 1,000 kilos of dynamite stolen from BC Hydro. There is also a group called Action Directe in France, banned by President Mitterrand after an August 9th attack at a Jewish restaurant. But that was deliberately aimed at people, and the Canadian letter claims no such intent.
The letter is an important lead for the police. So far, all they have to go on is a tape recording of the woman who telephoned in the warning, and they know where the dynamite was made. Now they have a better idea of the kind of person they're dealing with, and the letter suggests again that a woman was involved. It rails against patriarchy and the men who run the war machine. It also suggests someone who knew very well what he or she was doing and could do it again. Terry Malewski, CBC News, Toronto.
Waves of explosives-laden drones hit Ukraine's capital today. Blasts could be heard around Kyiv as terrorized residents ran for cover. As Briar Stewart reports, Ukrainian authorities say at least 4 people were killed, including a pregnant woman and her husband. And a warning, some may find the video in this report disturbing.
Another Monday morning of terror. This time, the weapon of choice, self-destructing drones. More than 20 of them targeted the capital, flying low overhead as police and soldiers aim towards the sky. On the street, people ran for cover as gunfire mixed with the sound of explosions.
It just comes out of nowhere. You know, people are running all over the place, and they don't know what to do, where to hide anymore.
Ukraine says it managed to shoot down the majority of the drones, but not all of them. One hit an apartment building, trapping residents inside. At least 4 were killed, including a young woman who was pregnant. This man lived in the building next door. After the first explosion, people started shouting, second blast, third blast, fourth blast, he says. Rescue crews spent hours going through the rubble. The latest residential building hit in what Russia has called an attack on Ukraine's critical infrastructure.
The Russians want to make the humanitarian catastrophe in our hometown and also at the same time destroy the buildings.
Ukraine says Russia bought these drones from Iran. Analysts say Russia isn't using them widely on the battlefield, but rather in urban centers.
It mostly seeks to keep Ukrainians, and by that I mean Ukrainian citizens, on their toes and inflict as much damage as possible to civilian infrastructure, basically to make Ukrainians' lives miserable.
Officials say what happened today is an example of why this country needs more sophisticated air defense systems, and NATO countries say more are on the way. In the meantime, officials are urging residents to not try and shoot down the drones themselves and leave that up to the military. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Kyiv.
To a crucial political meeting in Beijing now. The Communist Party is holding its week-long Congress. China's President Xi Jinping is expected to secure a precedent-breaking third term as leader. Sasha Petrusik now on his message and the potential challenges.
It's China's scripted spectacle of power. And at this Congress, Xi Jinping is clearly in charge. Head of the Communist Party and government for 10 years, he's set to continue for an exceptional third term. Over the weekend, he doubled down on his signature policies. Full control over Hong Kong, promising to do the same over Taiwan, the democratic island China claims as its own. Saying again he'll use China's rapidly growing military force to invade Taiwan if necessary.
Mr. Xi is consolidating all the power of China into his own person as a kind of overwhelming dictator.
But for all his power, there is grumbling on the streets over Xi's tough zero-COVID approach to the pandemic. I really hope these regulations will ease up soon, he says. They're frustrating. Ever since COVID first appeared in China in 2019, much of the country has experienced some kind of lockdown. Even now, more than 300 million people can't move around freely, as Beijing prefers lockdowns and apps that restrict movement to widespread vaccination. That's also stifled China's once booming economy, with the World Bank predicting only about 3% growth this year. Property prices have slumped. 1 in 5 young people is unemployed.
And so if the economic heft, which China has relied on for so long, were to falter or stall, or if it kind of goes through, kind of a recession with Chinese characteristics, then I think there will be consequences.
While they fully understand,
Party loyalists insist most in China support that trade-off in Xi's COVID policy.
they still want to continue to practice with a dynamic zero COVID policy because they put a higher premium on human lives.
But on the eve of the Congress, one protester dared challenge that party line. He unfurled a banner on a busy Beijing overpass, calling Xi a dictator and demanding an end to zero COVID. The banner was removed by police, but not before his message went viral on China's internet with words of support. Behind heavy security at the Congress, those reservations may also be whispered. But Xi's position won't likely be challenged. After all, he's already purged most critics from the party, quite possibly setting sights on being China's leader for life. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
A countrywide staffing crunch. The efforts to recruit new people in lockstep with workers who say they're planning to retire is next.
There's a place in Canada where wind can have a big effect on residents.
Wind is a big concern in Cape Breton tonight as they hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
With the wind trying to blow you away, Robert DeVoe knows it's the perfect time for a storm party.
120 kilometers an hour is not that big a deal. But when it starts getting to about 150, the dishes in the cupboards will rattle.
But these winds are not your ordinary coastal winds. They are the strongest winds that blow regularly in Canada. They're called Les Sweat by the locals, and they've been recorded at 233 kilometers an hour. When it's blowing this hard, it's impossible to do anything outside. Something the locals have had fun showing off over the years. One thing these winds do for the locals, though, is give them more time to practice their music. A sweat wind can blow for days,
You have to make sure that you only invite people you really like, because there's a possibility they might stay for a few days. And you just wait it out. And sometimes it's a long wait.
The death toll from floods in Nigeria has increased to more than 600. Authorities are racing to get relief to hundreds of thousands of people being evacuated from their submerged homes. More than 1.3 million people have been displaced by the disaster. Nigeria experiences annual flooding, especially in coastal areas, but this year's floods are the worst in more than a decade. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now with the forecast. We are not experiencing any sort of flooding at the moment at all. In fact, we're looking for rain, aren't we?
That's right, but we are worried when the rain comes because soils are now hydrophobic. So the water that we do get more at risk to run off and create flooding issues. Now, I'm not seeing an atmospheric river when the system arrives starting Friday, but it's going to take a long time to replenish the kind of water that we're missing. We are now on a 100-plus day drought. I want to show you the temperatures across the country because this is playing into what we're seeing on the west. Huge ridge of high pressure bringing high teen temperatures right now to parts of BC and Alberta, even as the sun sets. And then the cold air on the other side of that ridge digging down into central Canada. This will actually bring snow to the Great Lakes in a couple of days. So really seeing the two extremes from such a high ridge of high pressure. We are seeing the latest high temperatures we have ever seen this late in the season. And if we had hit those 30-degree temperatures this weekend, that would have been a new national record for heat this late in the season, but we were short just a couple of degrees because of that wildfire smoke. That high pressure is going to get pushed east, as I mentioned earlier. Thursday, it's going to get nudged out, and Friday completely out. So take a look at the rainfall totals through to Saturday morning. This is the first of several systems that'll move in once we get that pattern change. Notice the darker greens across Metro Vancouver. That's the 10 to 20 millimeter range, perhaps seeing closer to 30 millimeters in some of the mountains, and then up through central and northern coastal sections where you've been getting some good rain this week, but you too are in drought conditions. That's where we'll see the bulk, and I am worried about flooding towards the end of the week in through central and northern coastal sections. So 10 to 20 millimeters is our first round. That may, on its own, lead to some minor flooding, but we'll have to worry if we see sort of double those totals with the next few systems. Temperatures are also going to come down, but not until Friday. So keeping this going, there's Wednesday, Thursday, and then look, almost back down to seasonal for the end of the week. We have not seen seasonal temperatures once this month across the south coast. And it's going to be another hot one tomorrow. Here's your highs for tomorrow, 23 and Abbotsford, high teens across the island. But here it is, the icon you've been waiting for, and it is literally an icon. Getting the sunshine back on Saturday and then Anita round 2 Sunday night into Monday.
Yeah, it
Feels
sure
good.
is an icon for sure, especially because we need to look at the day we had today, and that really tells us why we need that rain so badly. Take a look at this time lapse.
Thank you for remembering the time lapse. I've been wanting to show this all show. Thank you, control room, for reminding me, because this is what we all woke up to this morning. And if you missed it or just felt it, that's what it looked like. And it will be back just like that the next couple of days. Those air quality advisories still in place. Thank you.
Extremely hazy for sure. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Let's turn now to staffing issues across the country. Employers looking to fill a wave of job openings are dealing with a two-pronged problem. They're competing with each other to recruit workers while also losing older ones. As Johanna Wagstaffe shows us, a wave of retirements has some companies bracing and one seeing an opportunity.
So right now we're in the west filter area. There's 10 filters on each side. These ones were installed in the 1930s.
Gord Mitchell runs the City of Toronto's largest water treatment plant. With labor shortages these days, keeping it running is always top of mind.
How critical is it to make sure that this place is always staffed? It's absolutely critical. We can't function without our staff. Our plant runs 24/7. You know, we really have to maintain our service to the City of Toronto for fire protection, for public health, for all the reasons that people enjoy our clean drinking water.
Workers here and in every field are in huge demand. So for the first time ever, Toronto Water recently ran a recruitment drive.
Come join Toronto Water.
You
can
make a difference.
Hitting social media platforms to target younger people.
I'm proud to work for Toronto Water.
Knowing boomers are about to make the job boom even harder to fill.
And demographics, retirement, has that affected you guys much? It's been a slow trickle, I would say, but you know, you see the oncoming tsunami maybe down the road and not that long. We have a lot of staff, over 30 years of service. Luckily, it's a great place to work. People don't want to leave, but you know, sooner or later, everyone leaves. And I see that over the next little while being a greater challenge maybe than historically it has been, for sure.
Mitchell might be worried about workers about to leave, but the statistics show hundreds of thousands have already left.
How much of a role do demographics play in the labor shortage that we're seeing?
Robert Kavcik is a senior economist with the Bank of Montreal.
I would say demographics are the single biggest factor. We're losing probably about 300,000 people per year right now just to retirement or near retirement.
A record number of Canadians have left the workforce at a time, Kavcik says, when more workers are needed to meet the post-lockdown demand for goods and services.
Regardless of the age cohort, participation in Canada is pretty much back to where it was pre-COVID, if not higher, across every age category. So it's not a case of people not wanting to work. People are back to work, participation is back, employment has fully recovered. This is a much bigger structural issue that's going on with the demographics of the job market.
We are now going to go to part of our expansion manufacturing facility.
Expanding a business while the workforce is shrinking might sound unlikely, but it's happening here.
So this is proof that you guys were not only surviving, you're growing.
Jason Tasse runs Lee Valley Tools and its manufacturing arm, Veritas. Business boomed during the pandemic as more people took up hobbies like gardening and woodworking. The strategy for the Ottawa-based company has been to keep growing.
So how many people have you hired in the last year?
So across both companies, we've hired 230 employees, 130 just in manufacturing alone, and the rest on the retail side and head office side.
There are a lot of draws, good compensation and benefits. Automated machinery like this sanding robot to make the work itself less menial. But critical to it all is flexible shifts. And on the manufacturing side especially, hiring newcomers with no experience and encouraging them to bring in friends and family too.
So what we're seeing here now is more on-the-job training?
So this is a great example of our strategy to bring people in who don't have specific manufacturing work experience. So as long as they have that desire and keenness to learn, we're willing to bring you in and teach you how to operate.
So basically, if somebody's willing to work, you're willing to have them.
Yeah.
The company's retail side is staffed traditionally with older workers. Most left during the pandemic because of health safety concerns. But incentives like seasonal work contracts and flexible shifts are bringing them back. And some of the boomers who recently retired from other fields are ending up here too.
Most commonly with retirement, people after they get the list done and the travel's underway is they're looking for something. And if we could plug back into that flexible workforce plan,
give people the opportunity to come back on their own terms. We see it as a big opportunity, and the number of baby boomers retiring right now is pretty significant. So it's a good match for us.
And you used all those kind of strategies to get them, and it's paid off.
I feel like we're ahead of the curve.
Staying ahead of the retirement curve can be a full-time job in itself. The City of Toronto isn't just hiring at its water treatment facility. Constant construction has created vacancies for engineers and city planners too. The city is bumping up pay where it can to compete with the private sector and offering flexible and hybrid work arrangements, says city spokesman Brad Ross.
So retaining the talent we have and attracting new talent, young talent, right? Because people are going to retire, people are going to move, so we need to continue to keep that pipeline open.
The city hasn't been hit with a big wave of retirements yet, but it knows it's coming.
How critical is it to keep that pipeline open, especially since boomers are retiring at record numbers?
It's absolutely critical. So in addition to just having an immediate need, we do need to be strategic. We do need to look ahead.
Back at the water plant, Mitchell hopes his team will keep growing.
This is the best place in Toronto to work, but maybe not everyone sees that from the ad and from the paper, right? And I think that's why we made the video, to show people how great Toronto Water is to work at.
The economy is expected to cool, which will ease some pressure. But an aging workforce means people will keep retiring, and that means employers here and elsewhere will keep hiring. Johanna Wagstaffe, CBC News, Toronto.
Half-price pets, why the SPCA is offering up even farm animals at rock-bottom rates. That's next.
And we're going to get you guys to step in and do the actual cutting at each step.
It means that I can become better, become safer, and help more.
Knowing these skills on your own and just being a bit more independent that way, I think, is important.
We had courses planned for the fall, but during the storm, as soon as it happened, we got inundated with requests for chainsaw training. There was a huge demand for people who had just purchased saws or had a limited amount of training that knew it wasn't safe to do without the knowledge they needed. We opened up this course as a way of kind of quickly alleviating that demand. I think it filled up within 24 hours, so yeah, it was busy.
I've been using chainsaws for quite a while now, and I figured it would be best if I tested my skills in a professional setting, and turns out I don't know as much as I usually thought I did.
That's why training is so important, because it creates a safe environment where people can test those reactive forces, they can feel the tension compression in a tree, and they can ask those questions before they're actually put in a situation that could end their life.
The instructors have been helping everybody and doing some really good demonstrations on really tricky ones where it's gotta think this through. There's some, where's the tension? Where's the compression? Where should I be standing so I don't get impaled? There's some things that are really important.
The average number of stitches that are needed to fix a chainsaw injury is 200, whereas chainsaw pants have the ability to stop a saw from cutting into your flesh. So it's, it could be the loss of a limb or your life if you're not wearing that PPE. So yeah, once you actually step into a woods, you're stepping into one of the most dangerous environments. There are overhanging limbs, there are spring poles, trees that have been pinched by falling logs, and those are all highly dangerous. Most people die in the woods not from their saw, but from struck-bys. So a struck-by is a branch or some part of another tree falling and hitting you.
I kind of wanted a bit more confidence doing that before I plunged into the forest, and I do value my life, so and these things are tons of weight, so you can't play around with it. So
I've learned a lot more when it comes to cutting, notching, and how to be safe in all of this. I feel a lot more comfortable with the chainsaw now.
Dealing with storm damage is dangerous, and it's a good idea to trust the experts. I know that in a lot of cases this past week, people simply needed to get free from their homes. but even so, your life is worth a lot. So it's important to really be considerate and thoughtful when you're deciding what to do and what not to do.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Support Cystic Fibrosis Canada with Gloria Makarenko at the 22nd Annual 65 Roses Gala on November 19th. Get tickets to the glamorous event at 65rosesgala.com. And the Chutzpah Festival returns on November 3rd to 24th with an exciting lineup of performances including dance, music, theater, and more. Visit chutzpahfestival.com for tickets and more info.
Well, if you're in the market for a discount dog or a half-price Quarter horse, the BCSPCA is offering 50% off adoption fees for all animals. From house pets to critters more suited for the barnyard, the BCSPCA is hoping to free up space at locations across the province. Kittens, dogs, rabbits, horses, goats, and even 2 pot-bellied pigs named Timbit and Greta are all looking for a new forever home. All animals adopted will get a free medical checkup, vaccines, and spaying or neutering.
We want to make sure we have enough spaces open in our facilities and our foster homes for other animals who need a warm, safe place to stay as the colder weather approaches.
Anyone interested in adoption can view all of the animals available for adoption online or visit your nearest BCSPCA Community Animal Center during regular holidays. Yeah, of course, COVID saw a lot of people trying to buy and adopt pets, and with people now going back to work, we've definitely seen many, many animals given back up to the shelters. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.